Hello, hello, and welcome to the newest episode of Borderline Podcast Disorder. I hope you had a good weekend and hope you have a good week ahead of you. My weekend and past week has been it's been okay. Unfortunately, I still have some health issues that made me have to cancel a couple of gigs that I was meant to do. Um, so that's not great, but I feel better now, and I feel like I'm on the up, basically, which is good. And yeah, we'll just see how things go from now on. And you know what? I'm just gonna keep it very short and simple for this week's intro, um, and just let you enjoy my conversation with a brilliant comic and a lovely, lovely human being, Bennett Arron. So enjoy. Okay, so Bennett, how's it going?
Yeah, all good. Thank you very much. How are you doing?
I'm very good, thank you. Thank you for taking the time to speak with me.
Pleasure.
I've been looking forward to this a very long time.
Oh, that's very nice. I hope I don't disappoint. Number of times I've said that
I'm
in my life, but yeah.
yeah, well, no, I'm sure. Look, it's yeah, I've been looking forward to talk to you on here for a long time, and now I'm super excited to have you on.
Thank you.
And I'm sure you won't disappoint. If anything, I hope that I can make it worthwhile for you.
I'm sure we'll be fine.
Well, how have you been? Let's start there. Like, how have you been recently? What's the fall, autumn you call it, autumn been like for you?
Yeah, actually, one of my favorite times of year. I hate the cold, but I love autumn for the trees and leaves and um, that type of thing. I don't know why. I just love looking out at it. So yeah, this time of year is fun, and then Christmas not far away, which I also love. So yeah, for somebody who hates the cold, and I really hate the cold, it's bizarre that I do like this time of year.
I mean, I think it's nice to, because I mean, I prefer cold over hot, and I think that's just because I sweat no matter what, so I'd rather not. But I think it's nice to even, just live through fall and winter when it's kind of like, it's a bit chilly, but then you might be indoors. I think the fact that you're indoors and you can have an excuse to like turn the heating on, that to me makes me super happy,
Yeah, we can all afford
sometimes.
that very well at the moment, can't we?
Yeah, I think, again, within reason. I think it's very within reason. But I imagine you've been busy because you've done the Edinburgh Fringe, right?
Yeah, so I did the festival this year. I did it 2 years ago with a show called Loser, which did well, and I thought I would do it again the following year, last year. But um, unfortunately, for the first time in my life, I um, I became subject to depression, which I've never had before, never encountered before, and I had to cancel everything. I had to cancel all my gigs for a year. I had to cancel the Edinburgh Festival. I'd had it booked and accommodation booked and the venue booked, and literally just stayed at home, staring at the floor, sobbing for 9, 10 months. And I've never encountered anything like it, and it was pretty awful. And that's what the show this year bizarrely became about, which I really wasn't expecting. So this year the show was called I Regret This Already. And it's sort of about how things in your childhood can affect you many, many years later without you realizing. And it's about mental health problems. It's about dementia. My dad suddenly had dementia. Um, and a bit about Parkinson's disease. My mum had that. And it's about loss and grief. However, surprisingly, it was apparently very funny. So I don't quite know how I managed that, but I'm delighted I did. and it had great reviews and full houses. And yeah, I was really pleased with something I wasn't expecting to do, and it was quite easy to write, which I've never found before. But it all sort of came from the heart, really. So yes, it was an interesting festival, and I'm now looking to tour the show a bit.
Wow. So, before I ask you something more about the how Bennett Arron became Bennett Arron, I want to ask you about this show in particular, because you were talking about how you faced depression, or that to this extent for the first time in your life last year. And out of curiosity, at what point throughout the journey between last year and this year's Fringe have you actually decided to write this down into a show?
Um, it was actually my wife who's always sort of been against my doing Edinburgh, only because she knows how stressed I get about it, and that it takes me so long to write it, and I'm writing it up until the last minute. And she said to me, something good has to come from this, because she was with me throughout the whole thing, and she suffered from my suffering. And she said, you've got to find a positive from this. And I thought, yeah, do you know what? I will. And that's what gave me the impetus to write it, really.
And how did you, I guess, like, how did it feel compared to, because you're talking about how this, obviously, you're talking about very real things, and, you're talking about, I don't know, things that are hard to deal with. How did you feel to actually not only having to write it down, but now how did it feel the first time you started performing it, or when you kind of you presented those very personal um, stories to people you essentially don't know?
Um, it's interesting. So I tried out, I mean, accidentally in a way. I was asked to do a gig, and I turned up, and it hadn't been publicized very well. I was only called in literally 20 minutes before the gig started in Wales, and the headline act couldn't make it. They said, "Look, will you come down?" I went down, and there weren't that many people in. I knew a lot of people in the audience, and there are a lot of other acts. And I thought, I can't just do my set, because they've seen it, they know it. And I've been sort of coming out the other end of this depression. I thought, well, maybe I'll talk a little bit about it just to see. And the reaction from that was so overwhelming that I realized that there was something in it. People really related to it. They understood it. They wanted to hear more. And that's where I thought, yeah, maybe there is something in it. And the first ever Edinburgh show I did, solo show, was about fraud and identity theft, because I was bizarrely the first major victim of identity theft in the UK. Woohoo! And lost everything, and my wife and I became penniless and homeless, and she was pregnant at the time. We had to move in with my parents. And then years later, probably for cathartic reasons, and again to share the experience, maybe to help others, I wrote a show about it. So my first show was about something really personal and true. And the result of that was that I got to make a documentary for Channel 4 in which I stole the identity of the Home Secretary and got taken in by Scotland Yard in a dawn raid. And because of what I discovered in the documentary, or what I did, the driving license application form in the UK had to be completely rewritten. So it had a quite a positive impact. So in a way, this show, although a completely different subject, I found that it has helped people. And last week, I do quite a few corporate talks. I do them about fraud, or I do after dinner things or awards thing. And this particular company said, "Can you talk a bit about mental health?" And I said, "Well, I can. I've never done that in a talk, but I can." And again, then I've never had a response like it. And people queuing up afterwards, wanted to talk to me about it, wanted to share their stories, wanting to say how much they related to it, how great it was to hear somebody talk about it. So it's obviously something that's really big at the moment, and something that people can relate to. So I'm well, pleased seems the wrong word, right? I'm it's good that I'm able to help people share.
Wow. Okay. I actually had no idea about the story behind the your first show, and I guess that like you said, it kind of it helps out with being able to showcase that sort of like vulnerability again. But again, I guess there is another question, because obviously you're talking about you talked about that, and I can only imagine. And I want to ask you some more questions about uh, what it was like at the time being like subjected to identity theft. But obviously, you mentioned that, and then before you mentioned how the sort of depression that you felt last year, it was nothing that you've experienced before. So my question is, how did can you now, looking back at it, see how would have that happened? Because by the sounds of it, you've been through very like worse things or like bad things. And how come it happened that you felt like, oh, now you had this sort of like peak of depression, or the peak of like your the peak of your mental health degradation, if that makes sense.
What you mean? How did it manifest itself, or what was the worst part of it, or
How did you? But yeah, so how did it manifest? But also, how did you feel for you to actually again feel the heavy depression now, rather than when you were going through the identity fraud thing before you
uh,
managed to get out of it and work through it and things as such?
um, I get. Well, it's funny, I hadn't realized that the fraud thing, in a bizarre way, had a lot to do with the depression. And this is what I mentioned earlier about how things in the past can come back at any moment. It had a small bit, in so much as, because we lost everything, I wasn't able to buy a property, and I've never been able to, because I was constantly playing catch up. And by the time I had enough money, prices had doubled. So, and we moved into my parents' house, and my dad passed away. Well, both my parents have passed away. My dad more recently, and we've moved back into my parents' house to do it up, to sell it. And I didn't realize what effect that would have on me mentally. So, so my dad passing, stress with work, moving back in the house, um, and a lot of other things that I was doing at the time, and medication I was taking, but nothing to do with that. Medication I was taking for a stomach problem. The
Hmm.
side effects of the medication caused problems, and I hadn't even realized that this was a thing. I didn't realize the side effects of medication can be so bad. It's only since then I've been looking into it. And I did a corporate gig after I started to feel a bit better, which took over a year. I did a corporate gig, bizarrely, for a pharmaceutical company. And at the end, and it had gone well. At the end, I just said, "Look, I want to mention some medication to you. I just want to hear what do you think." Like 700 people, and I mentioned these, and they all went, "Joe, take them." I was like, wow, okay. Look, I'm not anti-medication. I realize it keeps people alive, and we need some of it. But geez, just be careful of side effects, because they can be worse than what you had in the first place.
Wow. Okay. This is
Yeah, this is a fun, light, comedic interview, isn't it?
yeah. I think we started very on a very positive note. But I think again it's super important, and it is it's so interesting to hear about it, because again, like I actually, you're talking about the side effects of medication. I think I've been at the receiving end of that with actually my first ever antidepressant, antidepressive
Oh, right.
medication that I was on, and I'm still feeling the side effects, although I stopped taking it like 3 years ago.
Right.
So it makes, again, like what you're saying, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, now I get it, and it's true, it's interesting to think about the fact that, yeah, at the time I haven't even thought, I wouldn't even think about side effects. I wouldn't even think about, oh, but like what could go wrong from this. I
Yeah.
would just be like, yeah, cool, I'll do it. And now, and again, ever since then, every time I'm prescribed anything, or anytime I need to see a doctor, I make sure that I'm asking the question, like, oh, what are the side effects of this? And it's quite interesting to hear how everyone, finds out in their own way, pretty much,
Yeah.
what the downside of something is. And again, I think it's just like you said, it's not to say, because I am medicated at the moment, so I'm not saying that I'm anti it. I'm just saying that it's interesting to make sure that you get the full picture before you sign up
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
for
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
But now I want to get to know you, to get to know you better, to get to know you more as a person,
Mhm.
um, because I've known of you for years, and we kind of, I think we spoke, we exchanged messages here and there, and we talked. But I want to know, yeah, who's Bennett Arron? Like, how did you become the person you are today? And if you want to give us a perhaps like a little bio, and then I'll just ask you more questions from there.
Sure. Well, who am I? I'm a um, Welsh Jew, a very rare um, mix. I'm from a place called Port Talbot in South Wales, where my family was the only Jewish family there. And I had a religious upbringing, which wasn't easy, being in a place where there were no other Jews. And it meant I missed a lot of school and things like that. But my parents wanted us to have religious upbringing, which we did, which I also mentioned in the talk, funny enough, in the show. So I went to school with Michael Sheen, bizarrely, who I actually bumped into just before the Edinburgh Festival. We met on the South Bank, and he wished me well at the festival, and I wished him well with his run at the National Theatre. Not exactly the same thing. So yeah, so I went to school there, and it's funny, I'm still in touch with some school friends who are amazed what I do for a living, because I am naturally phenomenally shy, and I was very shy and very quiet in school. And people often say to me, were you the class clown? And I say, which is quite true, I really wasn't, but I did write all their material. And that's sort of me.
This is beautiful.
I'd be in the background, suggesting things and not doing it myself. So I was bullied a lot in school. Didn't do very well in school because of the bullying. Wanted to go to university to do psychology, but didn't get the grades, and ended up going to drama school. It was a 3-year course. I got kicked out after a year and a half for um, messing around on stage. It was a protest against a director, and they wouldn't change the director. So I changed all my lines in a serious drama called Murder in the Cathedral and turned it into a comedy. And that was sort of my first venture into doing stand-up on stage, I suppose. And the audience loved it. But then when he went back into this murder scene, everybody was laughing, so it didn't quite work. So I was asked to leave.
Oh, God.
And then I became a teacher. And I taught in a private Catholic girls' school, which was weird being almost the only bloke there and certainly being the only Jewish person there, but that was fun. And then I started writing for television. And at the time, you could send in sketches. And it was years ago, and I was very young. I wrote for people like Hayden Pace and Freddie Starr, a program called The Real McCoy. In fact, one of the sketches I wrote, I only found out recently, was in the top 100 sketches of all time or something. I only know because I got a royalty check for, I think, £2.50. Haven't spent it yet. I'm saving it up. And then one of the sketches I wrote, which I thought was really, really funny, the producer said, "No, that this isn't funny at all. What else you got?" I said, "No, honestly, I think this is funny." And he said, "Well, it's not." And I thought, well, I'm not going to argue with him. He's paying me. But I thought, how can I find out if this is funny? So I thought, well, I'll try it out as a bit of stand-up just to see if it works. And I went to the downstairs of the King's Head in Crouch End, where so many comedians started, and tried it out. And it got a big laugh. And I thought, oh, that's a really nice feeling. I'll do a couple more gigs. I thought I'll do 2 or 3. Ended up doing about 8 gigs. And on the 8th one, there was somebody from the BBC New Comedy Awards who said, they'd gone to see somebody else who hadn't done well. And I did well. They said, "Oh, we like what you do. We're going to put you forward for the awards." And I said, "Great." So I won all my heats. And then I was the runner-up in Edinburgh with Peter Kay. Don't know what happened to his career, but here I am. And so from then I got an agent, and that was it, really. And then it just all started from that 26, 27 years ago.
This is amazing. And also, you can see the huge amount of talent you have, because I was genuinely laughing just from listening to your story as it is. I don't know how many times you've said it like this before, but I can say that.
I don't know if I have, but that's very nice.
Well, you see, then it adds up more to my point that I think it's such an amazing story, and such an amazing way of telling it as well. So now you were talking about, because obviously you were like, so you're from South. Is it a town or a city?
It's a town.
A town's from South Wales, and you were talking about how you were the only Jewish family in the town.
Yes.
I'm actually, again, before we delve more into other questions, but I want to know, what was it like then during holidays, or even I guess Shabbat and things like that, because you were talking about how your parents wanted you to have a religious upbringing as well.
Yeah.
But then if you can't make a minyan and stuff like this, what was that like?
It was weird. The closest synagogue was in Swansea, and which was approximately a bit of a schlep. So there was, it was difficult. We prayed at home. I couldn't go out with friends on a Friday night, although sometimes I'd go for a walk and accidentally stumble into a pub that my friends happened to be in. And in fact, some friends still remember the fact that I used to meet them on a Friday night. Of course, being a religious Jew, you're not meant to spend money on a Friday and Saturday. So my friends would buy me a drink. I mean, talk about keeping up the stereotype. It's awful when I think back about it. But yes, a friend told me the other day that he reckons I owe him £1.20. Drinks were very cheap back then. But it was tough. And also, you've got the major Jewish festivals at the beginning of September, which is the beginning of the school year. And so I'd miss, 4 weeks or 2 days a week for 4 weeks. I would miss. And looking back on it, it wasn't fair. If you want to bring up children religiously, you go to a place where there are a lot of Jews, or you don't do it. And I think what my parents did was wrong, and it didn't help my brother and I. But you can't do anything about that now. So, but it was tough. But I have to say, obviously none of my friends in school were Jewish, and neighbors, what have you. Never, ever, ever came up against any anti-Semitism at all. Apart from the occasional jocular, your people killed our Lord. But apart from that, there wasn't, there really wasn't anything. Everybody was actually quite interested, and I was never treated differently. I was jealous of them because they had brilliant Christmas trees and they had presents and I had hot wax. But we never, never encountered any problems at all. That was to come later, sadly.
Yeah, well, it's that is quite sad. But I was thinking beforehand. I was thinking about something that you said about the like again missing out the 2 days, for the 4 weeks during the high holidays, and things like that. But then I'm quite curious. Then obviously with your academic journey, what was it like for your parents when they found out the work that you've gotten into? I guess even from the point where you've got kicked out of the drama university, or like the drama school.
Yeah.
Then when you decided to stop teaching, or were you still like teaching part-time for a while, or
no.
basically
I was a complete idiot. I was earning the best money ever. It was a great job, and I went, I know, I'll give this up to become an actor. So yeah. So they weren't very pleased. No, I think they wanted me to be, I don't know, a lawyer or an accountant or something with stability, as opposed to the career in which I went. But then they used to love to see me doing gigs or listening to me on the radio or the Red TV appearance. So they enjoyed that. Although they did see me do a couple of gigs where I absolutely died. I mean, which the memories of which, and I'm going back 20 odd years, I still remember it to this day, having my parents and my auntie in the audience, and I just bombed completely. So that those memories stay with you.
They definitely do. I think it's again, like I feel like in especially in those moments, because you don't necessarily, or like at least but also from personal experience, I've sadly never had the opportunity to have my parents see me do comedy. But I think even when I have like a close friend, or like if my fiance comes to one of my shows, and if I bomb, it just feels so much worse than not doing well in front of a room filled with strangers.
Yeah.
So I can imagine.
Yeah. Well, this particular one I did, I was invited by Port Talbot Council to be their guest speaker at their Christmas dinner. And it was all the dignitaries there, and there was press, and they had photos, and I don't know what happened. I decided not to do stand-up. I decided to talk about what I'd been doing recently. They sort of said, "Oh, we want to hear about what you've been doing." So I thought, well, I won't do stand-up. And I just thought I'd been in a TV program called Trainer. And I thought, oh, I'll talk about that. And I'll talk about it. And it just wasn't funny. And it was all uncomfortable. And then I ended, and I could still remember my parents' face. I ended on a really inappropriate joke, which is something I've never done. I'm not something that I wrote, not something I've ever done, about a rabbi and a prostitute. And I mean, and there was the local priest was there, and it was like, how can I make this worse? How can I make this more uncomfortable for everybody? Honestly, when I look back at it now, it's yeah. So. And nobody spoke to me afterwards, and the pictures didn't go out in the press, and yeah, it was all very, very uncomfortable. So,
oh wow,
yeah.
Okay. I mean, I feel like again, looking back or like hearing about it, is like, yeah, this is funny, like in itself. The having gone through that, but I can imagine what it was like at the time. And actually, here comes another question. What did it feel like for you? Because you were talking about how, you went, oh, this is a very good, very well paid job. I'm going to quit to become an actor. But how did it feel like for you, even when you first, you didn't get into the uni that you wanted to? Because of the grades, right? And now you've done the thing where you change the lines in the play, and now you're out.
Yep.
And then, yeah, like how did you feel in those moments? How were you aware of how you felt in those moments? Were you accepting your feelings, or were you just trying to ignore it and not to deal with it?
Well, I didn't particularly enjoy drama school, to be honest. I felt it was a bit of a waste of time. So I was worried about not knowing what to do next. But then the fact that I suddenly had this teaching job from nowhere because I was recommended by one of the teachers in the drama school for the position. So I was very fortunate. So I went from what am I going to do to here's a brilliant job. So there wasn't much time in between the two things. So it was so that was okay. It was when I left that to pursue acting was the mistake in a way, because I went from quite good money to literally nothing. And doing this job, you just don't know what's going to come in, 1 week to the next. I mean, fortunately, I got quite a lot of gigs booked in, and I've got some corporate work and awards hosting, after dinner stuff, and that's like. But next month, who knows what's going to be coming in? So, and that's the precariousness of the job. I haven't had a salary job for 20 something years. So that's weird.
I think again to an extent, it's what many people are, or not many, some people are striving, are hoping for. Like I listen to you and I'm like, oh, you know what? It sounds stressful, but in the other hand, it's like it's amazing, right? Because you get to do what you wanted to do. But I'm curious to see how did you feel when you've because it sounds like obviously this is still something going on. This is still something that you think about. But what was it like the first few times compared to even like what is it like now? Um, when those thoughts hit that, oh, obviously I'm making, I'm busy this month, but I don't know if I'm going to be busy next month. Have you learned to live with that sort of discomfort, or are you how do you manage it basically?
So I have several I guess sources of income, none massive, but like I run sitcom writing workshops. I've got one coming up in November. I think it's November the 10th. And I love doing those because I've had over 30 scripts produced on TV and radio. So I like helping people, especially people who've never written before. So I help them from scratch how to write a sitcom script. And people who've never written before have gone on to, win awards, have their own films produced in the cinema, have sitcoms on TV and radio they've never written before, which is, terrific. So I really enjoy doing that. And I do a lot of script editing for people with their stand-up and their own scripts. So I have that as a source of income. Also, as I said, the talks about fraud. I also do in-house videos for companies about fraud and cybersecurity. So I do that, and then obviously there's stand-up. So there's a few, and I've written books. So it's all little bits. If stand-up goes quiet, then I'll try and focus on something else. So that's because the precariousness of the job, I just can't rely on one source of income at all, really.
No, of course not. But then how do you how did you feel about it? How do you feel about it in the respect of, are you stressed? Are you, or because by the sounds of what you said earlier, it sounds like you're fairly good at you know managing and like looking ahead and going, okay, so I got to do a bit of this and a bit of, so that you're not only banking on one thing. But is it something that you've learned because you felt overly anxious at times or stressed or in any way, or is it something that you've kind of you always had in the back of your mind basically, and you were fairly comfortable with?
I've got used to it, but I do have sleepless nights going, okay, there's nothing coming in. So
Right.
that is a worry. It was more of a worry when my children were little. I used to have sleepless nights because I was, the sole money earner, and having two kids and keeping them in clothing and food by making people laugh is really weird. But that's what I did.
And it must be quite like interesting to in the respect of like, just like you said, because now you're responsible for your kids, like for kids, now you're responsible for other human beings. um have you ever have you ever had this like worry of, oh, have I chosen the right thing? And I'm talking about like, even not even careers, but even in the moments where you say you choose a job over the other, or perhaps you chose to focus on one particular job at a time instead of focusing on another one.
Um, yeah, I've got to. I was just thinking about something when I said about making people laugh. My son once had a friend come to the house, and I said something, vaguely amusing, which his friend laughed at. And my son said, "Oh, you're not very funny, are you?" As kids do, showing off. I then pointed at his PlayStation, his clothes, his toys. I said, "If I wasn't funny, you'd have none of this." So he didn't say that again.
That's very good.
That's nice. So, sorry, I lost my train of thought. You're asking me about.
No, that's okay. I was just asking you about whether you've encountered this sort of, oh, have I done the right thing? Have I chosen the
Oh,
right job? Have I
oh,
chosen
God.
the right project over the other project?
Um, I no, I always feel I've done the wrong thing. I mean, it's very funny because I look back over, or look what I'm doing and what I've done, and people go, "That's great." I feel that I haven't been successful. Really, I don't feel as though I've made a success of things. I don't know why, but I guess it's the insecurities of the job. Um, but it is funny that the mark of success in this industry is being well known, is being on TV, is being on live at the Apollo or whatever. And the number of times an audience member will kind of go, "Oh, you should be on. Have I got news for you?" I go, "Oh my God, I never thought of that. That's a brilliant. I'm going to give them a call tomorrow." Uh, but I mean, there's no other profession really where the mark of the success is because you're known. You don't see a doctor and they go, "I'm going to examine you." "Oh, really? I don't think you ever did mock the week, so I don't think so." It just doesn't. Yeah, just doesn't.
Yeah, I was actually thinking as well about the because about like yeah, like bankers as well, or accountants and stuff. Actually, I think if anything, you want for those people to not be well known. You don't want them to have. You don't want to have heard of them on the news.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's it. I mean, I get that a lot where people go, it's that thing of, well, you can't be very good because I've not heard of you. And you go, but I've made a living from this for 26, 27 years. So I can't be dreadful at it. Um, it's, yeah, it's, uh, conceptions are weird, really.
But I guess as well, like especially in the respect of, someone like yourself with like such an, a track record of brilliant work, but also just like with a very creative mind. It's almost always easy to not be happy with the end product, because you keep imagining more and more and more and more to it, and you keep seeing it in different ways, right? So that must be another barrier that you have to accept.
Yeah, I guess so. I think, I think, as I said, this job does feel that you are judged more than another job by notoriety, and also it's the thing of having to constantly prove to yourself that you're good. And this is why doing Edinburgh shows, I think, I won't be doing anymore, but what it does is that these are the audiences, and as I said, I was really pleased with the numbers that came, and they had come to see me. They hadn't gone to a comedy club and gone, "Oh, we're going to see some comedy, and whoever's on, we'll watch." We don't even know the names. They went, "Oh, this person, we want to go and see them," and that's great. I mean, even at this level, I'm not going to be selling out huge venues, but it was 120, 150 seated venue, and I was getting good numbers, and the fact they'd come to see me really made it worthwhile. And these are people who they'd heard me on the radio. I was in a Radio 4 sitcom called Alone with Angus Dayton and other people way more famous than I. And it was great fun. We did 4 series of it, and it's my favorite acting job ever. And a lot of people came because they'd heard that, and they really, really liked it. We were hoping to do a 5th series, but unfortunately, a new commissioner came in and decided not to go ahead with it, which was a shame. But it was, so I had people from that. I had people who see me previously doing shows, people who follow me online. And it was just really nice feeling knowing they'd come to see me. They'd made the effort to come and see me. And writing material, there's no greater buzz than writing a new bit of material whilst driving to a gig, trying it out there and then, and having it hit and having it go well. That's still such a lovely buzz. Because about 5 years ago, or 4 years, I'd had enough of stand-up. I just went, this is going nowhere. And I was looking to stop it. I just didn't want to do it. And then I just rewrote material and started my set differently and had a different mindset to it. And it just made such a huge difference. And now I found a love for it again, really.
That's interesting, because then, if that was the case at the time, and you were, what, 4 or 5 years ago, when you said you actually considered quitting, how long did it take for you to shift, this sort of like mindset and go like, oh, you know what, I'm just gonna try this other thing and see if that makes it feel better? Did you have to? Sorry, go on.
No, I was just thinking, actually, it's a good question. I think it was about 6 months, something like that, where I just thought, I even sort of stopped booking gigs in, even though I didn't know what the heck I was going to do. At one point, I was going to look to run a pub, like to buy a little pub and do, I mean, it's just mad thinking about that now. But it was just, I've got to do something, because I'm just not enjoying stand-up. I'm not enjoying what I'm doing on stage. I'm bored of it, and that's just going to come across to the audience. And then, I know what happened. It was after lockdown. That's when I'd had enough. Because friends were saying to me, oh, they miss it, they can't wait to go back. And I said, I have no interest in going back. So that's when that was. And I was doing some online gigs, and they were awful. And I just thought, no, I don't miss it. And I think it was as we came out of lockdown, I started writing a little bit of newer stuff and doing a different angle and doing things that were doing things that were a bit more important to me than just gags. Because when I first started, it was just gag, 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 and really fast paced because I didn't want to be heckled. And now I'm thinking, I've got a platform, so I should use that. And I think that's what made the difference.
Hmm. Okay. Another question here. It's you're talking about the at first, or like for a very long time it was just gag, 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 and now you're okay. I want to do something a little bit more different. Um, how did it feel to then again, like, I guess when you were writing jokes back then,
Yeah.
were you writing it from, like, again, whatever comes to mind, or was it, this is again still like, this is Bennett who is writing this joke and this is something to do with me in one way or another? Or was it more, let's say, did it feel less personal
Oh,
than it feels?
So when I first started, it was gags and puns. I mean, it was all based on truth in a way, but it was quite surreal, quite silly. There was no real, you wouldn't know who I was. I was sort of a character, a very naive guy from a small Welsh village. And I played the idiot on stage, or the naive idiot.
Hmm.
Um, and that's what I sort of got bored with later. Because I'm I'm too old to do it. That, and also uh, it it it's no longer that important to me to hide behind a persona, which is what I was doing. So I wanted to be me, and so my stand-up became much more long form than gag, 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 really. And even though I still have gags in there, and I still have bits of my set that I have done from day one, primarily because those are the bits that the commissioner, the producer said weren't funny. And I keep those in my set just to remind myself that they are and that he was wrong.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. So those are still in there, those bits.
Sorry, go on.
But what's funny is that there are bits of my set that are still sort of that naivety person, but then there's other bits that I talk about what happened to me, and I open up a bit. And I think from an audience point of view, it's a little bit of a journey, I guess, and they seem to enjoy going on it with me. So so far so good.
You see, this is actually, it feels like you read my mind a little bit, because my next question was going to be, how did it feel for the people who have followed your comedy for a while? When they, like, have you gotten any feedback to say that they noticed the transition to, like, again, and to what extent, for people who say, listen to your comedy 10 years, 20 years ago, and now they've seen this, almost like the upgraded, you know, Bennett. What did you ever heard anyone tell you that, oh, actually this is new, or this is, I haven't seen you like this before?
Not so much audience members, definitely other comedians. Comedians who who with whom I've worked a lot over the years have seen my material progress and seen me changing, and they've commented on it, and in a positive way, really. And the audience reaction has been better than it was when I started, and that's really helped. A sort of word of mouth on the circuit has helped, because I have had people say to me, "Oh, so and so saw you at a gig and thought you were really good, and will you come and do mine?" Gigs that I haven't played, and there's a lot of gigs that I've stopped doing, just because either the money's remained the same for 20 odd years, or the money has actually dropped, or the audiences are not the audiences that I want to play to. So I've become a little bit fussier with the gigs that I book, whereas before I would virtually take anything. But now I've become a little bit more, I want to play to this type of audience. That's an audience savvy crowd, not a group of, hens or stags who've gone, oh, after paintballing, we'll go to comedy. That I can avoid now.
That's really that's quite yeah. How does that feel? Because I'm asking in the respect of knowing that you perhaps you have this pressure of having to make a living again, because like it's your let's say again it's your main source of, like, one of the biggest sources of income. You want to be busy, you want, or like ideally, or in one's mind would think that you need to be busy, and you want to get revenue or like income in, but in the same time you value your art, and you value your jokes, and who who's the right audience for the sort of comedy that you're writing and performing.
Yeah.
How does it feel, like how did it feel to make that transition, whether it felt weird at all, whether you uh, I don't know, did it feel a bit scary perhaps, because you're like, oh well, if I become picky, then what if I run out of gigs that I
Yeah.
would like, audiences that I feel like will enjoy this sort of, like, what I'm doing, and yeah, how did that feel?
So years and years ago, I used to play for the Jongleurs comedy clubs, and somebody asked me recently, were you there at the peak of the Jongleurs clubs? And I thought, yeah, do you know what? I was. And we made a very, very good living from it. I could work as much as I wanted to work because they had so many clubs, and I could be the MC, or I could open, middle, close, whatever. So I could fit into any kind. So whatever, if I had a free weekend, I would ring them on the Tuesday, and I'd be able to work Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And that was great. And the money was good. And the gigs were generally fine, apart from some of the clubs. But then you'd get the Christmas shows. And the Christmas shows, the money would be time and a half. And I remember doing 27 one Christmas and hated every single gig.
Oh,
because these, and I am very grateful to the people who ran Jongleurs, because they paid for my kids to have clothes and food and what have you. But the Christmas shows, oh my god! So what would happen? People would book Christmas parties, and it'd be the boss going, "Well, I don't want to speak to these people. Where can I take them? I'll take them to a comedy club, and they can just sit there and watch comedy." And they'd never been to comedy before, and they would talk all the way through. There'd be fights. There'd be people urinating into pint glasses. There'd be
what?
yeah. It was, it's shocking. And but as I said, the money was good, and the money from that month would pay my tax bill in January. But I remember, and I did it for years and years, and then one November, and I had a lot of Christmas gigs booked in again, 20-something booked in. And I was on stage at their club in Leeds, just doing a normal gig, and I was halfway through, and I stopped, and I said, "I'm really sorry, I can't do this anymore. This isn't the comedian I want to be. Have a lovely evening." And I walked off stage. And I rang Jongleurs the next day, and I said, "This is what I've done. I can't play your clubs anymore because I'm adapting my material to the audience, and that isn't what I want to do. It's not the comedy I want to do. I'm not enjoying doing it. I want to be a different comedian." And they were so lovely, and they understood. They went, "But you got a lot of Christmas gigs booked in." I said, "Just take them out. I really don't want to play the clubs anymore." And spoke to my wife, And I said, look, this is a lot of money I'm turning out. She said, yeah, but you are always so unhappy in January because you're doing a job that you're not enjoying. So she understood. So I just did them and I just stopped doing them. 6 months later, Jongleurs went under. Don't think it's anything to do with me. Just want to point that out. But 6 months later, the company went under, owing comedians thousands and thousands. So I got in at the right time and I got out at the right time. So I was pleased with that. But I did do a gig about 5 years ago, and somebody came up to me and said that he was at that gig at Leeds Jongleurs Club and remembered me doing it and walking off stage. So that was quite interesting.
No way. And what did they say about it?
No, they said that, the audience were shocked. And he said, I get now why you did it. And, the stuff you're doing now, not that he remembered what I did then, but he said, I'm sure the stuff you're doing now, you're happy with. And I said, yeah, really. So, and there were people that had their jongleur set like 20 minutes and that's all they could do. And when Jongleurs went under, they didn't work anymore because their stuff didn't work for other venues. They'd catered it for people who were on stag nights, on hen nights, having birthday parties, not comedy savvy. And then you go put them into an art center and it just didn't work. And a lot of people sadly just stopped doing stand-up.
Wow. Okay, that's interesting, and I haven't. It's actually, one of the things that's I find fascinating is to hear from someone who's, who's been there and who's done that, and it's nice to hear that again. There is even if you feel like, oh, I don't have a choice. This is my field of work. I just gotta do whatever I'm being asked to.
Yeah.
It's nice to actually. It feels very refreshing to actually hear someone who's like, no, you still gotta, do what's right.
Yeah.
And be the. I think it's such a beautiful way of saying, like, being the comedian you want to be. I think that's I love that. Now I'm aware of the time. I just want to ask you one other question, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Are you still based in the same town that you were born or like grew up in?
No, although I've actually moved about 10 miles from there, coincidentally, because as I said, my parents passed away and we've been doing the house up. I thought it was going to take 6 months to do it. It's been 4 years because my parents hoarded everything from the day they met. And I've never known anything like it ever. So it's,
oh God,
yeah, it's taken a long time. So I'm not in that place, but I'm not far from there at the moment.
Well, the reason I ask you is because I wanted to know, like, what's your thought? Because I think you hear this sort of like idea a lot that if you're in the arts, you gotta be near, or you gotta be in London, for example. You gotta be in, I don't know, Manchester, or have you actually had to move far from home, or, like, again, to move away from home, or were you always based near?
No,
I guess
no,
where your heart is.
No, I've traveled. I've moved away a lot. So I lived in London. I lived in Hertfordshire. I lived in Spain for a little while. Lived in Los Angeles for 3 months to try and get work there. I actually got married in Los Angeles. So yeah, it's only now that I've returned to Wales, really.
I see. Okay. Interesting. And how does that how did it feel like, even like moving around, and is it something that you you planned with a long time ahead, or was it I don't know, fairly spontaneous or fairly fast turnaround?
Well, we were actually forced to move because when my identity was stolen and I needed to find somewhere to live that we could afford. So we got this little tiny house that we rented in Hertfordshire. And that was the reason for that. And that's where the children were born. And that's where we lived for 20 odd years. So it was
Wow.
circumstances more than anything else, really. So it was, circumstances more than particularly choice, I'd say.
Right. I mean, I'd love to do this with you again or for longer because I feel like I have so many more questions I want to ask you.
That's right. This has been fun.
It's been so great, and it's been so wonderful um, to hear your story, and now we talked about the Edinburgh, the fringe run that you had. It's called I Regret This Already.
Yes.
And you were talking about touring with it now, or planning to tour with it.
Yes, that's the plan. Yeah.
Where do and also is any of your so basically where can people find any of your work? Where do people can find you? Where are you active social media wise if they want to stay like up to date or like check and see like what you've been up to?
Well, like all the young kids, I'm on TikTok. And I don't know, show off, but one of the things I posted recently had 100 views. So I'm pretty sure that means I'm viral. I'm I'm on Instagram, Facebook, MySpace. All the big
MySpace.
No, not anymore. No, X, which I only use for screaming into an echo chamber, so I wouldn't, bother following me on that unless you want to hear my anger. So yeah, I'd say probably Instagram. I've just started a YouTube channel where I'm now putting up clips of me doing stand-up, which I've not really done before. I don't know why. Don't know if everyone wants to see a middle-aged man try to be funny, but I've done that. So so all those things you can find me, and as I said, I'm touring the show, so I will put the dates, I guess, on my website when I work out how to do it. So they'll definitely be on Instagram.
Perfect. Well, I'm gonna take your social media handle and I'll put it in the bio of this episode so people can find it easily. And look, I appreciate you not just for taking the time to do this, but for being who you are and for doing the brilliant work that you do. And I hope to catch up soon again.
Lovely to chat with you, my friend. And thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Take care, buddy.
Okay, well, what do you guys think? Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you enjoyed listening to it as much as I enjoyed speaking with Bennett. And check out the as I mentioned at the end of the episode, check out the description of this podcast episode to get a link to, or basically to see Bennett's socials, to see my socials, and if you enjoyed this, please come back. If you haven't enjoyed it, still come back. It might get better. Who knows? There is only one way to find out, and that's it. Now, from me, Pickle and Sarma, until next week, stay skillful. Goodbye. God bless.